Hi, my name is Tobias Löfgren. I work at Swedish Public Radio as a developer, and I'm here to talk a bit about the development of our open API, where it came from, how we got here, and where we're going next, because we've been talking a lot about technical solutions and ideas of how to implement APIs, but in the real world, it's very seldom you sit down and decide, now we're going to have an open API and it's going to look like this. It's been a bit of a journey. We started, we never sat down and decided that we should have an open API. It just happened. It started back in 2007, around 2007. An external developer, enthusiastic developer, wanted to have some way of figuring out what programs, what podcasts we had available to listen to at Sveriges Radio. And he was very enthusiastic. He started screen scraping, and we said, no, we'll supply you with XML files instead. And this was done completely manually at first. We collected them manually from the database and had a small script that wrote them out into a static file, and published them on a separate page on the web, which made him very, very happy. From there on, we went on to starting having RSS feeds more dynamically generated from our databases about everything that was available. And you don't really think about RSS feeds as an API, but they are, obviously. It's one of the simplest, most basic versions of an API. Around this time, a small, insignificant product called the iPhone was introduced, and we were pretty quick on to create an application called Sveriges Radio's Pod Radio. And the first real goal of our RSS feeds and internal API was to it was an internal API more or less, to provide information for the iPhone app. And suddenly we had an API. Because we had these RSS feeds, and they were not officially launched, but they were known by a small group of developers, because they could see how the iPhone app worked. And we soon also published on a page, these are the RSS feeds, because you can use them in your RSS feed reader and in iTunes to get the podcasts. And we also, as a part of developing the iPhone application, we also had a need to get information about what channels we had available. We soon wanted to develop a way of sending live information, live stream to our app. We still only had the iPhone applications. We didn't have any Android applications, which annoyed a lot of people. But that wasn't a problem, because we had these RSS feeds, and we had this unofficial public documentation about how the RSS feeds worked, and users on a Swedish Android forum called Swedroids started to group together, and an ambitious developer there started developing an Android app. And we noticed that, and we went after them with our lawyers. No. We actually thought that this was a really, really good thing, and we started to have a conversation with this developer and helped him, and asked him, what do you need? And what do you need to make the application better? And he said, oh, well, if we could supply some of these API calls, it would be really good. And which led to the launch of our first version of our API, which had features for listing channels, listing programs, searching for programs, what's currently playing on our different radio channels right now, connecting to live streams right now. And we published it as a first official API version. And we had a semi-official launch at Music Hack Day 2010, in January 2010, which got really good press, got some good feedback on it, and it was also the first time people higher up in the organization at Swedish Public Radio heard about it. And everybody was like, piracy, this is awful. We got to crack down on this. People are pirating Swedish Public Radio for free in their own apps. So somebody, it's not even really known who, but forces were scrambled, and this was published in the official documentation. It was sort of a quick lawyer hack to make sure it was consistent with our role as Swedish Public Radio. And I will not bother to translate this for the American audience or for the English-speaking audience. It's basically, if you use this, you may not earn any money on it in any way, and you have to be a nice guy and not hurt Swedish Public Radio in any way. This seems like a sort of reasonable user license, but there's a problem with this kind of. When I speak to the lawyers at Swedish Public Radio, they think this is perfectly clear. What we mean here. You can't use it for any kind of commercial, in any kind of commercial context, the API. But as a developer, you all know that what is a commercial context? Can I have a player with ads surrounding it, or can I not have ads but charge for my application just the same way as you charge for selling a radio and things like that? And the lawyers just shake their head and they say, "Oh." So in 2012, we started work to create a more general useful, less ad hoc API specification, because we really still didn't have an API that was thought out. It just had happened, more or less. And it was very oriented towards, our first version was very oriented towards our own play applications. And we wanted something that was more useful for creative work from other people, where you have more freedom about an API that wasn't directed towards creating a player application for Swedish Public Radio, a more general API. So we wanted to loosen the tight connection between the play apps and the API. And also we wanted to workshop the user license, the end user agreement, and see if we could make something that was a little bit more permissive and not as much as, that didn't scare away people that maybe wanted to invest a lot of hours into building something really cool and maybe didn't want to do it completely for free for us. We had some success. We workshopped, where's Andreas Kron? There he is. He came to us and helped us straighten this out in a lot of ways. We entered into a more explicit way of handling our API with the versioned API, with a life cycle of beta and release and deprecation of the old API, over a fixed period of time. We also put together a new version 2.0 of our API. We started a user group where users of our API could discuss together what they wanted and what they needed from our API on an equal level with all our developers. The developers of our own Play applications were relegated to use the user group for most of the conversation, so we evened the playing field for all users of the API. And it was a really good success. We have a lot of intelligent, really good people in the user group discussing and coming with requests and feedback. And it's really helped us a lot in the development of the second version, and also the continuous development of the API. And also, if something breaks, you find it out really fast from the feedback from the developers. We had some successes and we had some failures. We had a full workshop with the legal department of Swedish Public Radio, and we got absolutely nowhere because it's not easy. It's interesting because these things are one of the most fundamentally hard things about opening up an API. It's both letting people have complete freedom with your content and trust in it, and which for us ironically collides. You would think as a public service company, those of you who are from Sweden, you have already paid for all the content you could think. But the thing is, you have all paid for all the content on Swedish Public Radio and Swedish television for the specific ways they are distributed today. And opening new channels of distribution in this digital world is really, really hard, because we as an organization I'm a full-time employee of Swedish Public Radio, so I work with public service, but we have a lot of content creators, musicians, and directors and actors who are not directly employed by Swedish Public Radio, and we are distributing the content that they produce and they have copyright for. So that's why the lawyers are complaining. But we are working with this. We are working very, very hard with this. I personally believe that the more open, the way you distribute public access content in Sweden is the more channels you have to distribute your content, the better. Whether you're a commercially driven company or whether you're a public service company like Swedish Public Radio. We launched the second version of API last fall in 2012, and thus began the deprecation process of the old API, which leads us to the present. The second version of the API is used by multiple external developers. One very successful iPad app is Replay. I don't know how many people have tried it. It's basically an integration where you they integrate Twitter and radio, so you can tweet and have a social conversation about the radio content you're listening to. And that's exactly one of those kind of exciting things that we might have thought of, but wouldn't have had the resources to explore, at least not yet. So that is very, very exciting. And we are migrating our own apps slowly to version 2 of the API as well. This is one of the powers of versioning your API. We've had for over 6 months now, have had external developers testing and proofing version 2 of our API, so that when we're migrating our own Play apps to this API now, we can be pretty damn sure it works and is solid, and we've actually ironed out a lot of performance bugs. We are still the biggest users of our own API. So to have that opportunity to notice performance problems and things like that before we actually open the floodgates to the users of our own apps is very powerful. The future. During the fall, we've had some during the development of version 2 and the release of version 2, we had some pretty bold plans about a version 3 of the API, which would be even more general. In our content, we have lots of relationships, programs that are ordered in timelines, and they have content related to each other with the same people involved in creating them, and lots and lots of relationships. So we had sketches of this huge behemoth of really advanced version 3 of the API, where you could traverse this relationship tree, which could open up for a lot of very, very interesting apps, but it would also have been a huge development effort from our side. So some of the things that people really, really wanted from the API, we moved from version 3 into version 2, and we put the more fancy, future forward-looking version of the API into the future. And this is basically because of budget. It's an economic decision. Because within the organization, you move back and forward, and right now we have to focus more on real needs rather than inventing needs. And still, we have our users, we have our user group, and we're going to follow what people ask for a while we evaluate version 2 of the API. And this is what I touched about earlier, also about the future, and we're working on. I think this is one of the biggest questions right now. Is the user license agreement? How can I think it's very important for a real, truly open API that you can do whatever you want with it, and also that you're allowed to get paid for your work. You should obviously not be able to get paid for the work of our artists and content creators, but you should be able to get paid for creating an amazing app. And that's what we're working with right now. So it's educating the organization on the strengths of an open API. And that's it's hard in a big organization. But I think it's very, very important. It's very important for the future. So that's what I wanted to talk about a little bit. And basically, making an open API in the real world, in a real big and sort of old company, it's quite hard, but it's interesting work. Thank you. Question?
What would you say were the benefits you have gained from producing an API? As an organization, I mean.
First of all, as I said, we've had, for example, the Android Play application, what now is the official Swedish Public Radio application for Android. The first version of it was a completely freely a community effort, and we wouldn't have gotten as far so quickly without that effort. And what we did there is we actually employed the developer of that app to continue developing it in-house and making it the official app. And that's the obvious example. I think the Replay app as well. The side benefits of having it, we use the API heavily on our own website. Any live information about what's happening on Swedish public radio right now on the website comes from our own API as well. Thank you very much.